So why doesn't each of you take a 2-minute, give a 2-minute summary of what you want to say? And I know Takada Sensei is all ready to go, so we'll start with him. I got my watch here. Where's our timekeeper?
All right. The one thing is I would like to introduce my book. This is the reason why I'm wearing hat. To get the information, people have the right to know, right to access to the information. So today is a good chance to get the information, so both sides, the other side, lots of information cross talking. That's good. And I have a dream. One day in Okinawa, the leader of China and other president of the United States, and also maybe Filipino in China, Prime Minister or Japanese Prime Minister, they come to Okinawa and wonderful beach and with the bathing suits and talk to each other without any arms. Maybe talk about something, humanity or something. I don't know. Oh, you like that. So maybe they have a good conversation with each other and have some trusting or confidence. So to get a good information or even a bad information, anyway, it's something like they are human. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kotani?
Okay. So instead of making my final comment, let me ask one question to the audience. As I said, I ask this question to my audience every time. So we now have a confrontation over the Senkakus. And the U.S. government says the confrontation, the armed conflict in the Senkaku is covered by the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty. So, if we have an armed conflict over the Senkaku between Japan and China, do you think the U.S. would support Japan despite its deep economic relations with China?
Do you want people to show their hands?
Yeah.
So the question is, if Japan and China entered armed conflict, do you think that the U.S. would intervene on behalf of Japan? Is that correct? So raise your hand if you think the U.S. would enter an armed conflict between Japan and China because of the security treaty, right? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. You're counting? Did you count? Raise your hand if you think the U.S. would not enter the conflict and would leave Japan to its own devices. 1. Sorry. I actually, to be honest with you, I would have raised my hand to the second one. I don't know what that means about me, but and General Gregson's going, ah! But I kind of worry about that. Let's just say I worry about it.
Okay. So I am teaching a class at the Hosei University in Tokyo, and as I said, 70% of my students said no to my question. But I have Chinese and Korean students, and they think U.S. would intervene. So that's very interesting phenomenon.
Thank you. Mr. Iju.
Today, 英語十分に喋れないものですから、いろいろお聞き苦しい点もあったかと思います。英文の原稿は作成してありますので、それをアップしてもらおうというふうに考えていますので、その旨お願いをしておきます。で、あとお手元にお配りしたパンフレットについてもご覧になってください。で、あと沖縄県のホームページ、それとうちの課の方にですね、お聞きになりたいことがあれば、いつでもメールでも、お電話でも結構ですので、ぜひご連絡をください。英語でご質問しても結構ですし、それは英訳をしてきちんと返すことができますので、よろしくお願いいたします。
First of all, Mr. Iju apologizes that he was at regarding his English, so that's why I'm here. His English manuscript of his speech will be posted on the internet. I believe it'll be on the Uchinanchu Talkstar number 3 website. Also, so please look at that. Also, the pamphlet that he had distributed that was published by the Okinawa Prefecture. He said, please, he also welcomes you to take a look at the Okinawa Prefecture government website. And there is an email address as well as a phone number. And he said, feel free to send questions or call if you wish. And they will try to respond in English to almost every question.
Do you have to go down and do it, Liz? Do you have to? Thank you. Journal Lucian.
Okay, I just have 2 things. The first is, I really do encourage everyone to really study this topic about Okinawa and the bases, because there's plenty of information to be had, and make your own decisions on it. But as I really do encourage people to think for themselves on this. The second, the second point is that today is indeed March 11th in Japan. So you have about 20,000 people who 2 years ago had about 8 hours to live. I would ask that all of you in your own way think of those people. They were people who, believe me, when they heard that wave coming, when they saw it, they had plenty of real anxiety and they had real burdens. And the one regret that I have is that we could not get up there quicker. And that the Japanese self-defense forces, principally the ground self-defense force and the maritime self-defense force, who were the ones who really responded fast, and who did most of the relief work, and if it wasn't for them, it would have been a god-awful mess. The thanks that they got was everyone got a 10% pay cut the next year. But so next time, whenever it happens, I hope we can do better. If the Japanese self-defense forces had the capabilities of the Marine Navy Air Ground Task Force, you would have saved at least 3,000 to 4,000 lives. Instead, they froze to death in the first 48 hours. I don't think any of them would have complained about Article 9 or having soldiers come to save them. But really do please think of these people. Certainly for the Marines like us who went up there, it was really something to see. And if we just feel to this day, we wish we could have got there quicker. So do think of them. But once again, thank you very much for the chance to speak to everyone, because like most Marines, we love Okinawa. So to get to hang around Okinawans and Okinawan kind of people is a real treat for us. So thank you.
Confucius student asked Confucius that how to govern nations better. The answer is name the issue correctly, so that government can better govern the nations. That was his teaching. Then are we naming the issue today correctly? We are talking about heavy burden now. It is not hating U.S., it is not hating Marines, it is not anti-anything. We have to look at the issue straight forward. And if we can distribute the burden, why don't we do that? 74% concentration is I don't think this is politically sustainable. How long are we gonna continue this situation and hate each other and criticize each other? We have to stop that. I think there are so many ways to solve this out. Let's start it. And I think today's opportunity should be, maybe the great step forward for the future solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I'd also echo the previous comment about the privilege of being here to talk about these problems and talk about Okinawa. The museum attached to the Peace Memorial Park in Okinawa and Mr. Kerr's book, Okinawa, The History of a Small Island People, and the book published in Okinawa on the history of the reversion and others, all give a great view of how Okinawa views itself in the world, and I am taken by the experience of all of that. We need to, as I tried to argue before, we need to take Okinawa's geography as destiny. We need to shape it for the benefit of Okinawa. Hawaii is a great example of things that can be done. We have the Hawaii-Okinawa Clean Energy Partnership. We have the educational connections between University of Hawaii and Okinawa. We have the Abuchi Fellowship. We need far more of these things. We need to work a program where we can take, for example, people in the United States studying for teaching degrees. Let them do their student teaching commitment in Okinawa, teaching English. Let's develop partnerships where we can do what many of my friends in Okinawa urged on me when I was living there, was to help enhance the secondary school education system so that the youngsters growing up have more opportunities. We need to improve the business environment, and we can do it through a number of things. Colonel Newsham spoke eloquently, I thought, about the Singapore option. There's futures for joint ventures between American firms and Japanese firms, and including those on Okinawa, to raise the standard. The security issues, regrettably, I think are always going to remain for Okinawa. Okinawa happens to be in a very geographically key position for all of the big players in Asia, and that is not going to change. We need to find a way to integrate the security concerns in a manner that is more acceptable, perhaps. We need to develop more habits of cooperation between the U.S. and the Japanese forces. We need to find ways to do these things, but while many have tried, the idea of establishing a peaceful regime that is not backed by armed capability to guarantee peace, I think is leading us into problems that have helped to create the special history that Okinawa has from the old days. We need to do better. The other thing is the United States, with the current world situation, the United States and Japan have an alliance that is, I think, growing stronger because we're both facing problems. Japan's got economic challenges. The United States has economic challenges. Okinawa needs to become, for Japan, far more than a place of strategic concern, far more than a place for bases. Okinawa, with its growing population, with the tremendous work ethic in Okinawa, with the talent in Okinawa, we need to help Okinawa become the lead engine for economic growth in Japan. And now with microfinance, with micro-manufacturing, with all the things that the younger generation in here understands better than I do, with information technology and things, Okinawa can become a great economic powerhouse because we no longer need to have the land available to build huge steel mills and things like that that we did many years ago when Colonel Newsham and I were growing up in southwestern Pennsylvania. Again, thank you very much for allowing me to come. Thanks for the very candid conversations, and I hope to see, it was great to see old friends, and I hope to see all my old friends again soon. Thank you.
I've been asked to sum up, and I don't really want to do too much of that, but there were 2 points that I wrote down while the panelists were talking. And actually, one of them comes from this morning and Governor Abercrombie's speech this morning. But it was clear from what we heard from everybody that there's agreement on this panel and probably in this room that the situation we have now in Okinawa is undesirable. And if there's agreement on that really key point, Governor Abercrombie's challenge was, now's the time to resolve it. We've reached that point where we're not quibbling over, I think you were very eloquent, Yara-san, we're not quibbling over who hates who or who agrees. There's a general agreement that the situation's undesirable. So it is a great opportunity, and it was an opportunity to hear from people with somewhat, well, very different perspectives on how to resolve it, but at least there's an agreement on that point. The second thing is something that I think Pete was trying to raise when I shushed him up, which is that the conversation today and in general about Okinawa is dominated by a notion of nation states. Also, one of my students was saying this to me at the break. It's dominated by a notion of nation states and their security. And that is obviously an extremely important way to look at the world. We have no choice because of safety. But I think there are alternative ways of looking at these issues that don't involve military security as the first and last point to be discussed. And I think that was kind of what you were getting at, is Japan law, US law, they all have to do with those issues. So I would hope that a Talk Story 4 might involve that conversation as well. You talk about what younger students study, and that's what younger students study. So I think that that's something that we could increase this conversation more. I was very enlightening to hear both Takara Sensei and Mr. Yada talk about a generation gap in Okinawa view and world view in Okinawa. Well, of course, we have the same thing in all societies and all cultures. There's a generation gap in how people see these problems. And there are different ways of viewing them from the bottom up. So I really hope a Talk Story 4 may open up that conversation as well. But I really want to thank the panelists. It's been great for me to learn. And I want to thank all of you for working really hard in your questions. I feel bad. I only asked 6 or 7 of them, but I hope I asked the right ones. And thank you again for the team that sat and looked through all your questions and extracted what they considered to be the important issues.